Hi.
Hi.
Great. Okay. It's good to have you both online.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're just going to give
Today.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, we're just going to give it, let's say, a second and then we can start.
Yeah.
How is everything going?
Yeah, I mean, this time around, it's just become so hectic, like year end is coming, then like all these festivals and everything's just like popping up. So it's just like a mad season, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so I do think we have enough people right now online, and it is let me see, 7:31. So let's start. Hi,
Yeah.
everybody, and welcome to the Upside Space live conversation. I'm Natasha Jayasingh, and today in conversation with me, I have our two guests, Anna Seaman, who is a curator and founder of Moro Collective, and Sajid Wajid Sheikh, who is an artist, sometime curator, and a founder of White Noise. Now, the links to their pages and to the parts to White Noise and to Moro Collective is in our post, so you can follow them. Today, of course, we are talking about building a meaningful art ecosystem. And I'm going to start off by asking both of you to briefly introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your journey in the art space. Anna, why don't you go first?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Anna Seaman, as you already kindly introduced me as. I am, I'm a curator, founder of Moro Collective. I mean, my background is actually in writing. So I was an art writer. I've been living in the in Dubai for about 12 years, I'm not sure, more than 10 years in the art, working in the art scene. And I started off, as I said, as a writer, and I slowly sort of moved into the role of an independent curator because I found that actually one of the primary skills of curating is sort of being able to draw a narrative between different art practices and artists. So I moved into sort of a role as an independent curator. And then in 2021, last year, I co-founded Moro Collective, which is a curatorship. That's how we call ourselves. We are a small collective, four of us, and we work with artists, physical artists initially, to bring them into the NFT space, but also within the NFT space in the digital world to add a layer of curation, which we feel is super important when it comes, well, for the same reason as art in any space, to be honest, to be able to bring out that narrative and the concept and the real reason that people make art in the first place.
Sajid, tell us a little bit about your journey in the art space.
So hi, I'm Sajid. I've been an artist all my life. Like ever since as a kid, I was somebody who's just drawn towards paints and stuff. So like it's a gradual journey. Like I'm also unfolding. Like with every opportunity, it comes with its fair share of learning and unlearning. So I call myself a multidisciplinary artist. So it sort of like makes me dabble between different disciplines within the sphere of art. And in like last year, I think we formed White Noise, and basically we just wanted to explore NFTs and just wanted to see like the possibilities of this new avenue that's come up, and completely didn't wanted to miss out on that as well. And luckily I found people who like just pulled me in that in their endeavors, like space, and White Noise is just like another starting point to begin with. I'm really excited.
Great. Okay. So, Anna, I'm going to ask you, you have written about and curated art in the traditional art world for many years. I want you to give
Mhm.
us an I want you to give us a brief overview of the art ecosystem as it exists today, the issues with it, and the changes that you potentially see possible in the Web3 art ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, you did prepare me for this question, Natasha,
Yeah.
but it's still a giant question. I mean, we could stay here all day to sort of describe the art ecosystem as it exists. But what I will say And when I came to this, so I did not, just to repeat what I said, I did not come from this from a kind of like an artist background or even an art historian background. I came to this, actually I was a journalist and a writer. So when I came to it, I really noticed that the art ecosystem, as the traditional art ecosystem, as it were, is very elitist, honestly, for want of a better word, very kind of closed. If you're in, you're in. If you're not, you're not. And that has its, that has its sort of merits, I guess, if you're talking but I mean, any industry, I guess, has its sort of kind of inner circle. But the point of art and the reason that people make art is so it gets seen, so it gets heard, and it's people who have something to say. And I think it's very, very difficult to crack in, sort of break into the system, if you like. Maybe 1% of galleries and the 1%, the 1 or 2% of artists in the world are represented by galleries. And there's a big leap between someone who's just practicing and working on their work, and to sort of go from that studio practice to exhibitions, to galleries, to getting seen and heard by people all over the world. Now, obviously, I'm not saying every artist, necessarily should be at that level, but there was just a hierarchy which I didn't actually appreciate, because honestly, as a writer and a journalist, when I read a lot of stuff that was written about these artists, I felt like also this is really alienating. Some of the words that people use, like the art speak. Come on, guys, I'm a journalist and I'm an English literature graduate, and even this doesn't make sense to me. So how is the normal quote unquote person supposed to enter this gallery and not feel intimidated, enjoy the artwork? And all of this is what sort of drove me forward to wanting to be an independent curator and work with kind of emerging artists. But fast forward to Web3, and I think you probably know what I'm going to say, but like Web3 is a much more of a level playing field. I mean, even we all know that the NFT space, let's be very specific and talk about just the fine art NFT space, is there. Everyone is kind of starting from zero. You can be a really well-established artist or not, and of course there will be some sort of pecking order or hierarchy that does naturally evolve within the NFT space as well, but it's much more democratic for the real sense of the word. People reach audiences directly. There's no middleman, there are no galleries, there are no art, auction houses or art fairs, or this kind of structure that exists. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that shouldn't exist, and it has to, obviously, but the market, the ecosystem definitely would really warrant from a more publicly what's the word I'm looking for, like
Accessible.
publicly accessible, but also publicly managed, if that's the right word. Like those people who are selling and who are popular are doing so because they're actually reaching people, and their message is ringing true with people. It's not just because of a slick PR machine which is telling you that you should buy this artwork for $100,000 or whatever the price points are. So I think that on the utopian side of things, Web3 is like I said, a leveler. I actually wrote about this once. I wrote an article called the Great Leveler, which is actually a term that people used to talk about death. It wasn't supposed to be as morbid as that, but like basically we're all born and we all die, but in the sense of like, let's have a situation where everyone kind of works on their own merit, like a meritocracy. So that's why I love the Web3 space. And I'm also understanding that I am talking about this in very rose-tinted glasses kind of way. Of course, there's always going to be flaws in the system, but ultimately the direct contact between artist and collector is something that I really value and hope that we can maintain as we move forward in this space.
Right, yeah. And I do think that I know both of you are curating shows for the Upside Space, and this is one of the things that we've addressed, is how do you make it accessible while at the same time making sure that you can navigate and find work in context, right? Because at the same time, if you remove all aspects of, let's say, like, you don't use curators, you don't have people to storytell or place work in context, you're also looking at work in isolation. So
Mhm.
yes, of course, there are players in every system, and each one of us has a role, right? And that's what brings me to the next question is, when we do talk about an art ecosystem, there are different players. You represent two of them. Anna, you're a curator. Sajid, you're an artist who occasionally curates. How do you see your roles being used to build a more meaningful art ecosystem? Sajid, why don't you tell us first? How can you use your role as an artist to build a more meaningful art ecosystem?
Yeah, so essentially, like any kind of group, you kind of sort of start feeling like, I mean, like in the past, when you look at like the art history, like the art history has always brought up these isms, right? Like which were really like in a way responses to a situation, to a larger like worldwide situation in that sense, like world wars, famines, and stuff, right? So like essentially like the entire group also needs to like over a period of time, like we kind of sort of felt like the group is just like a very open ground for people to just do like random things, in the
Right.
sense like you see like a jungle which is filled with artists, and each corner is doing something completely different, somebody's growing like wheat, somebody's growing rice, and then they're not like interacting with each other in that particular manner. And then they the smaller groups within the groups which sort of become their own connoisseurs, in that sense. But as a group, as a collective, you kind of as a curator also, you kind of sort of want to become like somebody who enables the communication to happen between them, and then the value of what art is also, I mean, art is everything in that sense. Like a really good driver is a really good artist in that sense. But what do you have in this context of you painting pictures, right? And then it's not like over a period of time we kind of sort of came about the idea that having really good aesthetic is not about having a really good something to say, sometimes a really good aesthetic will not have something really meaningful to say. It's just blah,
Mhm.
whereas like some really good messaging has very okay aesthetic, so kind of building that in the like picking and understanding and making them understand like a larger group of artists that like the art is also about retaliating or trying to raise a voice or trying to raise a point, other than just being super distracting in that sense, in the sense like it just becomes more or less just self-satisfying, so I think like a group makes a lot of sense to help like raise a larger issue.
I think also, when you are an artist and you are part of a collective or a group, you can also use your own practice or your own following or your own audience to also highlight other practices, right?
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
because this is something that I see that I know a lot of artists who follow other artists' practices, and those artists are not necessarily on anyone's map. Nobody's
Yeah,
necessarily aware of them, but they have really good, strong practices.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and they might not be the most like tech savvy or the most outgoing people, but if you are part of a collective or if you're part of a group, or in your case, like you're an artist curating a show, it gives you a chance as an artist to highlight other artistic practices,
Sure, yeah, yeah, it totally
which
does
I think
that,
is
yeah.
great. I mean,
And
because
also
you're
like
someone who has
trying.
a yeah, you're someone who has a big following, and it's great that you can use that following to highlight the practices of other artists.
Yeah, like a lot of artists are responding to a particular issue collectively also, but they're just not aware of it. Like just the moment you kind of like put them all in one group, you kind of see that, oh, like 10 of us are just like reacting to the same issues, And it's interesting because everyone's aesthetic, everyone's like upcoming and everything's shortcoming and everything is just the same, like uniquely same, or uniquely different in that context, But just making them aware about their practice makes you like a lot of illustrators who are basically my friends are artists who are responding to a brief, generally. They're responding to, oh, like I want to sell this product. What is the best possible way to sell this product, And on the side, they have this practice, which is just sort of like, something that feeds their Instagram. But when you take their work and then make it like available for us or for a platform, they kind of sort of start feeling that, oh, like my work has worth, and someone actually saw that worth in it. I mean,
Yeah.
apart from the larger art gallery scene where you're really trying to, there are a lot of like variables to you getting a representation. For us, it's just like an open like field for us to like pick and choose and then make them available on Web3.
That's awesome. And I like the idea of, yes, giving artists a sense of worth about their own work. Anna, what about you? How do you see your role as a curator in building a meaningful art ecosystem?
Well, I mean, you kind of both hit the nail on the head, really. You've already said it, but I'm not an artist, but I've always really valued the role of being able to work with artists to I mean, curation for me begins before the artwork goes on the wall, before you actually even come up with a concept for an exhibition. I don't work with huge amounts of artists, but when the ones I do work with, I like to say that I curate with them along the journey. I give them advice as they are, working on their practice. And I think, to take it back to my industry, which is writing and journalism, it's a bit like, writing a book without an editor. You need that sort of voice to bounce things off from. As a creative person, you always need that voice. So I think on an individual level, the role of a curator is really, really important. On a wider level, I know we're talking about building a more meaningful ecosystem. I mean, I've said it already, but the speed at which the Web3 world emerged upon us and NFTs suddenly became mainstream was absolutely crazy. I mean, it's still going on. Most people are either swept away by the wave or still trying to work out what on earth the wave is. But as that becomes more normal and people are understanding what is an NFT, why would I make one, why would I buy one, all of these questions that we try and answer, what's happening is that I lost my train of thought. What I was trying to say was the curation, that's it. So curation in this space is so important because of the speed when something's growing so quickly. And also there are a lot of headlines about finances and money attached to this world. So when someone thinks NFT, they also think millions of dollars. Then you get a lot of people piling in. So the need for curation and quality control, if you like, or as you mentioned, building up concept, building up narrative, really helping people who are interested in collecting this art to find the right art is so important, because otherwise it would just be, we don't want this utopian ideal that I talked about before of how everyone can be united and on an equal playing field. We don't want that to be tidal wave washed over by the fact that loads of people think they're going to be a millionaire if they make an NFT. So it's really important for me to continue what I'm doing I mean, obviously we all hope that, as we grow, we work with more and more artists, but I do think that individual personal touch is super important, and for more people to kind of enter the space from a non-artistic standpoint too. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm not artistic, but I am not an artist. I'm a writer and a curator, and I think that is important for those roles to also be filled.
Completely, I completely agree. And as we've always said on the Upside Space, is we see our curators as enablers, right? You enable artists to tell their stories. You enable artists who are not necessarily in the mainstream ecosystem to be seen and heard, because curators are also constantly looking at other practices and are not just, unlike a gallery system, which is married to a roster of artists and has the interest in promoting that roster. Curators cut across all kinds of artists, right? Independent artists, represented artists, unknown artists, emerging artists. And so I honestly see the role of a curator as an enabler, to
Mm-hmm.
enable artists to tell their stories and to enable collectors to discover newer art practices and, newer artists.
Yeah.
Um, so
I mean,
now,
I kind of think of it like a conductor, where
Yeah, I
the
like it.
individual artist is sort of like, very well trained with their flutes or like their
yeah,
guitars, whatever. And then you just like, like ask them to create this mental larger dialogue that you have. And then like, they respond to like, your cues. And then like,
yeah,
you have a really cool collection.
you help build a symphony. So I'm going to ask, and I want you to answer this. We've discussed the role of an artist. We've discussed the role of a curator. A third key player, of course, is the collector, right? Whether that's the institution, whether that's a private collector, public collection, whatever. Now, there's a lot of conversation about royalties and in the Web3 space and collectors needing to pay that to artists, right? And we see it happening in, let's say, the music industry, where every time you listen to a song, a part of that money is actually going back to the artist. But now a curator, a collector might argue that, why should they pay a royalty to the artist when they further sell a work? And I would like you to just shed some light on how is this A, beneficial to the collector, and again plays its part in continuing to build a meaningful art ecosystem.
Okay, well, by now you understand I am an idealistic person. So, and the dirty language of money is of course it's all tied up. But I would like to say, as a collector, if you're really truly collecting from, I mean, I don't like to put the words right and wrong in from a kind of reason. You love the art, and yes, you might be doing it for investment purposes, but generally there is a sense of wanting to support the artist underneath that reason to buy the art. In most cases, I would say, I would hope in all cases, but probably not in all cases. So the obvious answer to that question is, of course, the benefits to the collector is that you're supporting the artist that you love, therefore, they're going to make more work that you can buy. But I know that's a super, super idealistic answer. What I would say is that the blockchain and the way it's emerging in the art industry and the benefits long term it will have for the collectors are, I think, outweigh, I think that, let's just put it this way. If you have a collection of art, traditional physical art right now, even in 2022, most of it is authenticated by pieces of paper, which you're given by the gallery or the auction house, wherever you've bought this artwork from, a piece of paper. Even in this today, this is the most, so NFTs are changing that in a way that, even for physical pieces of art, now the blockchain is being used for certificates of authentication to verify art collections, and there are people doing that all over the world probably, and so that's a huge benefit that blockchain can bring. The issue of paying royalties, I think it's so important to the artists that it should outweigh the fact that the collector has to give away 10% of his profit when he sells the artwork, if he sells the artwork, to the creator, because the fact that you can actually for life, forevermore, benefit from your own creation is, surely it should be. I mean, again, I find it hard to separate my sort of base morals from the way that I know the world works. I understand if you are in this for investment purposes, that's a chunk that you may or may not want to give away. But the point is, actually, it's there whether you like it or not, and that's what's so great. The smart contracts are there, and it will encourage artists to really continue what they're doing. I mean, the old stories about all the great masters, Picasso. Actually, Picasso wasn't poor. Van
No,
Gogh
I know.
dying,
Yeah.
Van Gogh dying with with madness and all these artists, so many of them died poor, and now, somebody is benefiting from their artwork and gaining a lot of money from that. I believe that there should be a system in place where the creator, the artist, or their family does benefit from that forevermore. I mean, I hope that's not a too obvious answer to your question, but for me, I see the collector, as you mentioned, you actually said the collector is part of the ecosystem. So they should take their role and take, I think, take their kind of, take it on the chin, you know. Like if you sell an artwork for 10 times what you bought it, then that's fantastic for you as an investor and as a savvy businessman. But surely just a small percentage of that should actually go back to the person who made it in the first place. I believe that should be acceptable.
I agree. I mean, I do think that, for an artist to actually be able to survive and thrive, it's important for them to continue to get back from their work,
Yeah.
irrespective of whether it's sold once or twice or 10 times,
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, it's not a new concept. We see it in publishing, we see it in the music industry,
Yeah.
where every time a song is played or a book is sold, the original creator is getting some of that money back. And you're right, a lot of us have this idealistic, thought of what an artist is this martyr living and making art just for the sake of it. But the truth is that an artist needs to also live on his art. And I
Yeah,
think that for an art ecosystem to be sustainable and to be fair to all the players, I do think this thing of royalty on sales is very important. And like you said, it's great that Web3 can sort of address that in a very automatic manner without actually having to chase behind somebody for that.
yeah.
Sajid, I wanted to ask you, you have been working in the NFT space. I know that you have sold work as NFTs. And I wanted to ask you, as an artist, what is the advice do you have for other artists entering the space about how can they build a solid sort of ecosystem of their own? And I know today we have a lot of tools, right? Like we have social media, we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
all of, and how can you use that as an independent artist who may not have representation to sort of build your own
Yeah.
ecosystem?
So I think it's an interesting question because like selling NFTs is also kind of related to your social media game, and how you play it. So I think it's interesting how sometimes like mixing everything together in the most positive way helps you bring like really interesting things out of it, in the sense like whereas like now Instagram is just becoming this kind of entertainment platform, you kind of also look at it as somebody who's sort of learning from it as well, and the work that you keep putting out is also not just for the sake of it, but also the sake of documentation your own progress in that sense, and then the documentation of progress from which is immediately response. You get like an immediate response of someone liking it, not liking it, someone super liking it, where sometimes like it's an interesting space for you to use all of these tools in a productive way, I mean, it's like any other tool, right? Like screwdriver, like either you can build like something really interesting out of it, or you can stab somebody with it, right? It's completely up to you, but that's the whole point of using like social media in your art practice, where you get to build your own gallery, say for example, for the first time, and you get to meet somebody who's like a chance, like galleries, right? Like right now there's so much little scope for you, like I mean, no, I don't know who plans out like like Sunday I'll go to a gallery, I mean, there's a very small niche of people who get together and go to do this, I mean, whereas somebody who's making art on Instagram immediately for no good reason shoves their art in the face of the person who's sort of looking at something else, maybe, in that sense, with hashtags, right? And then like that person gets involved with like the kind of work you're doing, and then slowly and steadily it's a matter of educating and showcasing your skills, and then what you have to talk about underneath those skills, and I think it's interesting to use them, like save buttons, right? Say for example, it's just a good reference point for you to like adhere to like these international galleries. Like, you don't really have to go to, like, earlier people used to go to these international biennales and stuff. Like, I mean, obviously, like, looking at a masterpiece is much different than looking at it on a piece of screen. But there's a limited chance for you to get inspired by it, like, hone your skills. Like, there are certain things, like, YouTube, say for example, is also a really interesting space for you to like keep learning. Like, I mean, if you have a practice which is like sort of brainless, I mean, if you're doing like design work or adaptations, which is just like time consuming, it's interesting to put like a documentary of an artist, like which sort of inspires you how their journey was, and then like what do you do in your journey that makes you feel like also gives you more strength in the kind of endeavor of becoming an artist. In the sense like, oh, it's not going to be easy. Like, the best of artists out there had to struggle. So you keep like going on in that sense. So it's all like helping.
I really like though what you said, like, is that social media can actually be used if you use it right, and you get into it, and you use it for growing your audience. Because like Anna said, in the NFT world, there's no hierarchy right now, right?
Yeah.
You have artists who are not at all known in the art world, really killing it in the NFT space in Web3,
Yeah.
are like
Yeah.
superstars in their own right over there.
Yeah.
And you have well-established artists of in the existing art world who nobody knows of in the Web3 or NFT space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you actually do, as an independent artist, have this opportunity of sort of building your own network and guiding and sort of creating your own narrative of your artistic career by using these tools. And that
Also,
today
like
is,
the depth, like the art is all about like going deeper in like in your practice. It's almost like however like the market is like, art as a practice is very shamanic. The deeper you go into your own brain, you kind of like become more aware of like what you can do with like these skills. I mean, the surface level learning a new software is just like a very big hurdle initially for a matter of 6 months. And once you get to like become like use it as a part of your own like how you think and how you make things, it then like you start creating so much. And then like because of NFTs, you literally can be somewhere very far from the main market. Like, I mean, earlier people would want to go to art schools essentially because art school doesn't really teach you art as such. It's just a good ecosystem of people who are doing like learning on the same level. But on social media, if you find like a group of people who are doing things like you're at the same level, you kind of have like a art school right there in your pocket, in that sense.
Nice.
yeah. Yeah,
And
I
you can
think
go
like that's
anywhere and then be an artist.
That's true. I mean, and I think that that's, like, on the Upside Space, we have four different kinds of curators. We have art curators like Anna. We have artists as curators like Sajid. And this is to highlight, other peer practices that people might not be aware of. We also have gallerists as curators occasionally who may work outside of their roster of artists. And we have something called a guest curator, which is a curator from a sister industry like music or fashion, because this allows for a larger audience to, like a cross pollination of audiences, so that we're not in our own separate bubbles. Because if someone is interested in art and fashion, they are probably an audience that is also involved in art, or interested in art, but just haven't had enough opportunity to engage with it, right? And so we have guest curators from these industries to, again, bring in not just a different audience, but also different ideas of what is an art practice and what is a strong art practice, right? And as you said, like, it's not necessary that you have to have had a major art education. It's about whether you're strong, whether your practice is strong. And that's the brief that we've been giving our curators, is that it's okay if the artist is unknown. It's the strength of the practice that we're concerned about, because what we want to showcase on the Upside Space is really good, strong art practices. And this brings me to sort of, our last question is, currently, as we've all mentioned, everyone has their own little community and following, like whether it's a curator or an artist or a collector. And Anna, we've talked about how these are like little bubbles everywhere, little communities existing in their own tiny bubble. And one of the things that we've been trying to do is to bring all these little bubbles together so that it's a bigger, larger, more vibrant, sustainable, supportive ecosystem, right? And I personally believe that the more open and accessible a system is, the better it is for everyone involved. And I'm going to quote Jennifer from Moro Collective when she says this lovely thing where she says, "A rising tide lifts all boats." So, if you used your position to shine or to highlight the ecosystem or to raise up the ecosystem, everyone benefits from it, not just you. So what are your closing thoughts on building a collective ecosystem as opposed to the current system of, these tiny little bubbles functioning on their own? Anna, why don't you start?
Okay. So yeah, you're right. We have talked about this a lot. And again, I do wholly believe in the utopian rose-tinted ideal that if everybody looks after each other, or a rising tide lifts all boats. I mean, that is Jen's favorite phrase, but it honestly has been one of our mottos since we began, because we just believe honestly, it came from the fact that we're working in a small space, a space that's growing tremendously fast, but we're still, like, if you take the people who are in Web3 in Dubai as a sort of starting point, we're still talking about a very small group of people. So there's no point in burning bridges. That was essentially where that phrase comes from. But on a more global, ecosystem, it's the same. A rising tide lifts all boats. Let's look after each other. Let's support each other where possible. Now, what I want to say to you about this point about small bubbles, I mean, individuals. So, as a sort of opposing point to that, I mean, at the end of the day, we also have to value individuality, and I think there is a value to be had in some of these smaller ecosystems existing. We don't want this world to be one sort of homogenous large bubble where everyone's the same and everyone's doing the same thing, because obviously, as you mentioned earlier, Sajid, everyone's different and everyone's unique. That is important to celebrate too. Essentially, what we're talking about is an ecosystem that has the potential, if used correctly and not abused by the big corporates or the big business, or then we have the potential really to exist in a place that we have not done until now. Let's just look at the history of the web, or this thing that links us all. Web 1 was a one-way street. Web 2 is a two-way street, but it's a street where people don't even realize that they are being used as the product. The user is the product. Our data is the product. The algorithm knows us better than we know ourselves, because that's how the big corporates are still the ones making money from us, while we still kind of all struggle to get our message out there. If Web3 is really truly adopted the way that it should be and could be, and when we all get our heads around what it really means, it means that we can exist in these bubbles and continue to have our own little conversations, be linked and truly support each other in those bubbles where necessary, and that is what we mean when we say a rising tide lifts all boats, because that does not mean you'll have to get in the same boat because you will sink. It means let's hold hands where we can, where we need to. Let's push this one if we feel it needs to. Let's support that one if we feel. Let's help the other guy to up his game a little bit if that's what we think we need. Obviously, we also need to look after ourselves. I'm not suggesting that we're ever going to live in a world where people are not selfish or egotistical, because that's a human condition as well. And I think what I'm trying to say is that we can accept all of this about the way we live and the way we create and the way we support, and still, hopefully, God hope that the corporates don't kind of ruin this, but live in this place where it's fine to be who you are, whoever you want to be, but also, like, let's also look at what everyone else is doing on a level playing field. That's my soapbox for tonight.
I do think you're right, is that, like, of course, everyone is going to look after their needs first, but we do understand also that there is, there's this fear, there's this thing of scarcity, or this in the current thing, it's like I'm not going to share my audience, I'm not going to share my contacts, I'm not going to introduce you to somebody, I'm not going to, reach out. And I think that that's what I hope changes in Web3, and that's what I hope is that, like, through your own practice and through your own role, um, while you grow, you can also take others along on that growth journey,
Yeah.
ideally.
Absolutely.
you know
Yeah.
Sajid, do you have any last thoughts? And then I'm going to open it out to any questions in case we have any. So yeah, do you have any last thoughts?
Yeah. Last thoughts are essentially like, I mean, it's just like interesting to have like, Web3 come in because, like if like the art work comes out of a system that you build, it's like a process. And then like, when like, you can build a process which can generate art, which basically means that you're minting money in that like weird sense, like utopian sense, in the sense where if you are able to create six artworks, then uh, by the same process you can create 60 artworks, but in the web3 world, like that number needs to be much higher, like say for example, if somebody is doing a pfp, like one of one pfps, right? For someone who doesn't know pfps, it's a profile picture project, right? Which can go as high as 50,000 or 500, 5,000, 10,000, that number, right? So it's interesting for somebody to develop those processes which make or generate that many number of artworks, because if you compare that many artworks to a general art world, that's a very huge number, and which basically is just going to put you down, because what's the value in one of your artwork, right? And this space is allowing for you to be fully like do not hold those taps back, just create as much as you can create, and today tomorrow something will happen, and then like, it just gives you the opportunity to believe that, okay, like, for digital artists to aspire to become fine artists, because earlier digital artists were just like digital artists, they didn't really care about the art world, because they were like I would get like in jobs, I would get like these kind of messages saying, "Arey bhai, ye fine art nahi hai," like so it was sort of like this kind of diversification, like very much particular, this is fine art, this is the commercial art. But now people who can use commercial art practices, like tools from commercial art practices, and make works which can like, entice a bigger audience, so yeah, it's interesting to see like where this can go. And then like, I mean, people who are creators, like for them it's just opened like a floodgate for opportunities to come in.
I think I do like your point about Web3 also bringing to the forefront digital art practices, because in the traditional world, digital art practices have been something that have never really thrived. Most of
Yeah.
the most of the practices have been the more conventional practices. And so it's great that, like, digital art and digital artists are also sort of getting a chance to showcase their work. And as Anna said,
Absolutely.
like, one of the things that we do want to very clearly, define or mention is that we are talking about fine art NFTs. We're not talking about collectibles. We're not talking about digital assets which have been made into an NFT. What we're talking about is still a strong art practice and
Exactly.
works which have value as pieces of art. So it's not about the flipping, it's not about the collectibles, it's not about these big scale projects. It's about those pieces created by artists who have a consistent strong practice. And the advantage of buying that piece as an NFT, which, as we just talked about, the advantage is that an artist, a curator, and a collector all have in this ecosystem, and what it could potentially
Yeah.
be. So
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
I'm just going to quickly ask the audience if they have any questions. And if not, then we can wind up. I know that 1-800 Bureau has been sending a lot of love to Moro Collective. Um,
I don't think she's in the room anymore. I was just checking who's in the room.
I think, yeah, I think she's one of your artists, and I know that she's been saying that you guys have been doing a great job.
She's a classic. She's sorry.
No,
She's a
go
good
ahead.
example of everything that I was saying, basically. She's somebody who was not known, still, arguably, might not be known by people outside of the space, but it has a great talent and deserves to have her voice heard. So that's what I mean when I say, like, bring everyone into the space and have them judged on their own talents.
Right. Okay, so I don't think we have any questions.
I think we just have a question.
Oh, there is? Somebody sent a question?
Yeah.
I don't see it.
It says, I just want to know how to showcase at the UpsideSpace.
Okay, so the UpsideSpace, unlike OpenSea or Foundation, is not open directly for artists to put their work online. And this is because, as we said, when we are talking about art as NFTs, we do want the art to have context. We do want storytelling to be part of the narrative. So we do have curators who select artists and use their role to highlight and enable artists that they think have a strong art practice to come onto the space. And that's how it is for now. Down the line, after a few months, we will have a system where we will have an in-house curator to enable conversations with independent artists who may not be on the radar of curators that we work with. So for now, unfortunately, if you are an independent artist, you cannot directly be on the platform. But in a couple of months, we hope to be able to address that with an in-house curatorial team as well. For now, we do have amazing curators like Anna with Moro Collective and Sajid Wajid with White Noise, bringing to us artistic practices that really may not be on the mainstream radar, but definitely need to be seen by an international audience. So thank you both for joining me, and thank you all for signing in. And we will see you all on the UpsideSpace.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thanks, Natasha. Bye, Sajid.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.